They laughed while I packed my life into 2 suitcases. Not behind my back. Not quietly. Right there in the doorway. My husband, and the woman who used to schedule his meetings, now standing in my home like she belonged there. I kept folding my clothes. Carefully. Neatly. Because if I stopped, I might break. Lisa, don't make this harder than it needs to be, Mark said, leaning against the wall like this was some minor inconvenience. Like I was the problem. I looked up at him. 10 years of marriage, and I didn't recognize the man in front of me. His assistant, Claire, let out a soft laugh. Not loud, just enough. Enough to sting. I can help pack the rest, she said, stepping forward like she was doing me a favor. I zipped my suitcase. No, I said quietly. You've done enough. She smiled. Mark sighed like he was exhausted by me. You're overreacting, he muttered. Overreacting. That word echoed in my chest like something hollow. Because the truth was, I wasn't reacting at all. Not anymore. The shouting had already happened. The crying. The begging for explanations that never came. That part of me, the part that needed answers, had burned out somewhere between discovering their messages and watching him stop denying it. Now, there was just silence. Cold. Controlled silence. I stood up, took one last look around the apartment, and realized something strange. I wasn't sad. Not the way I expected. Just aware. Aware of how small they both looked. How long? I asked, my voice steady. Mark didn't answer right away. Claire did. 6 months, she said almost proudly. 6 months. Half a year of lies, dinners, pretending. I nodded slowly. That explains the late nights. Mark ran a hand through his hair. Lisa, we didn't plan for this to happen. Claire stepped closer to him. But it did, she said, placing her hand on his chest. And just like that, I saw it clearly. Not love. Convenience. Excitement. Something shallow dressed up as something real. I picked up my bags. Don't worry, I said softly. You won't have to explain anything else. I walked past them. Claire's voice followed me. You'll be okay, Lisa. Women like you always land somewhere. Women like me. I paused at the door. For a second, I considered turning around, saying something sharp, something that would wipe that smile off her face. But I didn't, because they already thought they'd won. And sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is let people believe exactly what they want. I left without another word. The first night was quiet. Too quiet. I stayed in a small rental across town. Nothing fancy. Just a temporary space with bare walls and unfamiliar smells. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at my phone. No messages. No apologies. No regret. I let out a slow breath. Good. That made things simpler. The next few days, I moved slowly, not because I was weak, because I was thinking, watching, waiting. Mark didn't try to reach me. Not once. But I heard things. Through mutual friends. Through whispers. Apparently, Claire had already settled in. She redecorated the living room. Hosted a small dinner. Introduced herself, as if she'd always been there. I smiled when I heard that. Not out of anger. Out of certainty. Because there was one thing they didn't know. One thing I had never needed to say. The apartment they were living in wasn't his. And it definitely wasn't hers. It was mine. 10 years ago, before I married Mark, I made a decision. A quiet one. I invested. Carefully. Smartly. Property. Not flashy. Not risky. Stable. That building, the one Mark proudly called home, was purchased under my name long before we said I do. He knew I had investments. He just never cared enough to ask details. And I never felt the need to correct him when he referred to it as our place. Because to me, it didn't matter. Back then. Now it mattered. A lot. A week passed. Then 2. I didn't rush. Revenge isn't something you scream. It's something you plan. I met with my attorney. Went over documents. Ownership papers. Lease agreements. Everything was clean. Clear. Legally. I was the landlord. And Mark, he was just a tenant. One who had violated multiple clauses. Subletting without permission. Unauthorized occupancy. I signed the notice. Calmly. No hesitation. No anger. Just finality. 3 days later, I drove back. Not to confront them. Just to watch. From across the street, I saw Claire walking in and out of the building, carrying shopping bags like she owned the place. Mark followed behind her, laughing, like nothing had consequences. I sat in my car and waited. Right on time, the delivery came. An official envelope, stamped, clear. I watched as Claire opened the door and accepted it. She glanced at the label, confused. Then she opened it. I couldn't hear her, but I saw her expression change. The smile disappeared. Fast. She called out for Mark. He came over, took the paper and read. Once. Twice. His face tightened. Then he looked around, like the walls had suddenly shifted. Good. Now he understood. My phone rang. I let it ring twice before answering. Lisa! His voice wasn't confident anymore. Just shaken. Yes. What is this? He demanded. We got an eviction notice. I know. Silence. You signed it, he said slowly. Yes. You can't do that, he snapped. We live here. I leaned back in my seat. No, I said calmly. You stayed there. Another silence. Longer this time. You never told me. You never asked, I interrupted. His breathing grew heavier. Lisa, be reasonable. We need time. I almost laughed. You had 6 months, I said quietly. Claire's voice echoed faintly in the background. Panicked, asking questions. For the first time, she didn't sound confident. She sounded scared. Mark lowered his voice. Don't do this. I looked at the building, at the windows that once held my life. I'm not doing anything, Mark, I said. I'm just enforcing what's mine. This is petty, he snapped. No, I replied. This is legal. Another pause. Then softer. Where are we supposed to go? I closed my eyes for a moment and remembered standing in that doorway, holding my suitcases, listening to them laugh. You'll be okay, I said, echoing Claire's words back to him. People like you always land somewhere. I hung up. The next few days moved quickly. They tried to delay it, tried to negotiate, but the law was clear, and I didn't bend. I didn't need to. I heard they argued, loudly. Neighbors complained. Claire didn't look so comfortable anymore. Mark stopped going out. Reality has a way of stripping away illusions. On the final day, I went back. Not for them. For me. I stood across the street again, watching as they carried boxes out. This time, no laughter. No confidence. Just tension. Frustration. Blame. Claire walked ahead, clearly upset. Mark followed, trying to keep control, but failing. Their perfect little story was falling apart, exactly the way it started. Messy, unstable, temporary. I didn't approach them. I didn't need to, because closure isn't about confrontation. It's about knowing you didn't lose. You just stepped aside long enough for the truth to reveal itself. A week later, I walked back into the apartment. Empty, quiet, but this time it felt different. Not like something I lost. Like something I reclaimed. I ran my fingers along the wall, took a slow breath, and smiled, not because of what happened to them, but because of what didn't happen to me. I didn't break. I didn't beg. I didn't chase. I waited, and when the moment came, I acted, calmly, precisely, without noise, because real power doesn't scream. It moves in silence, until it's too late to stop it.